All right, good. So, how do you how do you find big data?
How you define big data?
Yeah, well, what do we mean by big data?
Huge data available for computing and analysis and coming to certain trends or outcomes.
Okay, but what distinguishes big data from usual data?
Is it the sample size, too large sample size or available resources?
Okay, all right, good. Other thoughts?
Very large data sets, or I guess data that is routinely collected, and the primary purpose might not have been research, but it's being used for research purposes.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, that's big data in research. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, essentially, a working definition of big data is data sets that exceed the boundaries and sizes of normal processing capabilities, forcing you to take a non-traditional approach to analyzing the data. So essentially, what we're talking about is that this is the normal processing capabilities, but now we're dealing with data, as somebody has mentioned before, large data sets. So what, having said all that, what is the, so big data relies on large-scale databases, multiplication of data sources, that requires advanced storage capacity, and uses novel computational tools that allow for high-velocity data and analytics. So the my next question is going to be, what are the sources of big data?
Could be huge medical records, forums, data.
I'm sorry, what kind of data?
Medical records, huge medical records throughout the years, for example.
Okay.
Data of forums.
Forums?
Yeah, meetings, conferences, things like that, organization.
Oh, what kind of data do we get from there?
Lots of data could be there. I mean, there in the conferences, lots of studies published and lots of discussion going on. And
oh, okay. Hold that thought, because I'm gonna show a study that was done analyzing tweets. Okay, maybe a lot of people tweet, who use Twitter at these conferences. I'm sure they do. Okay, other sources of big data. So we have the electronic medical record for sure, especially since the electronic medical record has been digitalized. So it's very easy to access now the electronic medical record. Other sources of big data?
Usage data from electrical devices, either that's routinely collected by a server or like internet data.
Okay, yeah, internet data, so social media data.
Social media.
Yeah, right. Okay, let me have one more answer.
Mobile.
Yes, okay, yes, right, the mobile. Yeah, everybody has a mobile. So
Yeah.
essentially we are talking about, social media data, electronic medical record, mobile apps, especially now with the health apps. Okay, Google and Apple are getting into that business, text messaging, and then we talked about genomic data. So there certainly is a lot of sources of medical of data, and all of these sources are being used in research, and it's I mean, so many journals out there that are publishing these data. So the ethical issues shown in this slide of big data, number one, not too surprising, right, is privacy and confidentiality, issues about informed consent, justice, trust, data ownership, transparency, and then, we get the usual ethical issues, but these are the top ethical issues when we're dealing with big data, and we'll see why or how that comes to be. All right, so the other thing I want to point out with the big data is, where are human subjects in big data research? Now, I asked that several things that big data brings to the table. One is that big data research methods exacerbate a long-standing tension between the social sciences and research regulations that are geared to the methods and harms of biomedical research. So what I'm trying to say is that our tools that we usually use for biomedical research is somewhat not transportable to the social sciences, and big data research really is more akin to social sciences research than biomedical research. The other thing is that so here's the example. So regulations exempt projects that make use of already existing publicly available data sets on the assumptions that they pose only minimal risk, right? We went over this before. So usually the definition of a human subject is that if we are accessing publicly available data sets, not only do they pose minimal risk, but oftentimes we're not dealing with human subject research. So now, there are many data sets that exist about individuals in the public domain. And while relatively harmless, innocuous in themselves, they become highly identifiable when merged together, and not only identifiable, but when you put a wide range of these publicly available data sets together to secondary uses and combined with other data sets, they can pose serious risks to individuals and communities. What I'm trying to say is that when you put all these data sets together, they become sensitive to the individuals and to communities, and hence one needs to understand now our previous notions of what are human subjects from a regulatory point of view may be different in the era of big data. Questions about that? So let me give an example. There was a person in the UK who wanted to remain anonymous. However, someone was able. He was an art dealer, and someone was able to use publicly available data consisting of geography, positioning, where his data, where his collections were being shown, and other types of publicly available data, and they were able to identify him. From publicly available data sets merged together, they were able to find out who he was. So, that's the point with publicly available data. You could be non-identifiable, but when you put all these data sets together, one could identify you. Also, think about all the pictures on the internet. Does anybody on this presentation not have a photo in the on the internet? I think it's probably fair to say we all, whether we know it or not, maybe somebody took a picture of somebody and you happen to be in the photo. Everybody is on the internet. And when facial recognition becomes more widespread, everyone will become identifiable from publicly available records. And so big data really bends the definition of what is a human subject, especially from a research point of view. All right, so do you all have this case that I sent? All right, so why don't you go into the breakout rooms, and why don't you discuss this case? This is a case involving social media, so let's do that. And so let's and then these are the questions. Comment on whether comment on the deception was justified. Are there any potential direct benefits to the participants by this research? And what do you think was the expectation of privacy from the members in the support group? All right, so what do you think about this case? Was the deception? What do you think about the deception? Was that appropriate?
We think it's unethical to go in a hidden identity and collect data from a group that doesn't know the purpose.
Okay. Well, I mean, so how is this different from other types of deception research?
Well, I guess in other research, there's normally a clear benefit for the participants or from people from the participants group. So it's not clear whether the psychologist is using this to gain understanding of the sort of behaviours and mindset of anorexic. It doesn't say. It says that they're. I mean, I guess you like to think that the data would be used to help prevent self-harming.
Well, I mean, research doesn't have to benefit directly the participants in the study.
No, but I mean, it also doesn't say. I mean, but to benefit people from the target population. It doesn't say that the psychologist is obtaining data to understand self-harming amongst anorexics for intervention purposes. But I assume that's what they're doing.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're trying to understand the purposes of this support group and why a support group is being formed to help each other, as opposed to maybe this could be an insight into what these individuals need. I mean, other like-minded anorexia people need in the future. So, I mean, let me put it this way: if there were adequate societal benefits, would that? I mean, deception research is justified by the societal benefits.
Yeah, I think if to me there was clear justification that by using deception they're going to have a truer understanding of self-harming behaviours and anorexia, and that findings might be used to either prevention or intervention strategies, then I think you might be able to justify it. But I think the other ethical issues of not being able to fully I think there's some issues with maybe the topics they discuss and other factors that could identify them, such as I don't know, things they discuss that maybe they're where they're based, the country or the city, what job they do, their appearance. I mean, I think it would be challenging to do if you didn't deceive people, because obviously you wouldn't get people being open and honest and discussing the topic because it's very sensitive. So, self-harming behaviours and normal people with anorexia have other psychological health issues.
Well, so was this a public domain or a private domain? The support group.
We don't know the actual platform, but their group seems to be private, since
username and password need to be used to join the group.
Well, the investigator was able to join the group. So the issue is, was it a moderated group? Was there someone controlling access to the group? Did you need to gain permission to join the group? I mean, that's not revealed in this short case write-up, but that's something that one needs to know, and members of the group needs to know that as well. Now, how many times do we join a group, if we have joined an online group, and do we actually read the fine print on how other people could join the group, right? So what is their actual expectation of privacy? Did the group members think that this was a private online group? Apparently it wasn't, because the investigator was able to join, and for sure there was deception, because the investigator didn't reveal his or her true intentions, right, of joining the group. Now, I think someone might have mentioned this before. Could these individuals be identifiable? Let's say you as an IRB, you ask, okay, let's say you think there's huge societal benefits, and you approve the deception. And now, I guess the next question is, will these individuals be, how do you protect the identities of these individuals? And so the investigator says, well, I'll use pseudonyms and I'll paraphrase what they say.
We
Is
were
that enough to
discussing
keep them?
that there are other things that might reveal the identity of the people in the group, and we mentioned things like their own description of themselves or their places, their institutions. All these are things that might reveal the identity, and it's very difficult to hide them in a certain way or in a standard form.
Right. I mean, you merge. I mean, they might have said something similar in another online community that then could be matched up. You put, again, all these public databases together. Even if you paraphrase what they say, if they've said it enough times, how many people have repeated things that they said before? I mean, we get used to we're a very repetitious society, and we tend to repeat things in different forums. And if you merge all these databases together, you're bound to re-identify these individuals. So even paraphrasing what they say could lead to them being identifiable. So let me get right. So let me get back to the. All right, do you see the presentation now again?
Yes.
Okay, good, great. So what's the deception justified? Now, according to the original paper that was published, the authors did believe that given that the charges laid against the pro-anorexia community, that they are effectively sanctioning self-starvation, they believe that the potential benefit of their findings would be beneficial. And it turned out the investigator enters the support group by registering a password and username, but then reveal the true purpose of becoming a member. Well, let me skip that. Again, one issue is there an expectation of privacy? And we talked about that, and it all depends on what's in the fine print when you join a support group. Now, having said that, this so-called public-private divide is somewhat blurred in the social media context, and so is there a public-private divide in social media? Now, as I mentioned before, the definition of a human subject, as you know, you get data through an intervention or interaction with an individual, or you obtain identifiable private information, which begs the definition of what is private in the social media context. And now, again, in the regulation, the definition of private includes information about behavior that occurs in a context in which an individual can reasonably expect that no observation or recording is taking place, and that the individual can reasonably expect will not be made public. Identifiable private information is private information for which the identity of the subject is or may readily be ascertained by the investigator associated with the information. Well, let me skip that. Now, the issue is demonstrated in this slide. Remember when on the internet, nobody knew who you were, and that doesn't happen anymore. So a large proportion of not only the US population, but the population of the world have social media account. Almost everybody has a presence on the social media, and hence social media can be a powerful research tool for recruiting subjects and for conducting research. However, we need to understand the unique risks and the benefits of social media for research. So now, social media represents a marked change in communication. We're not dealing with, letters, which could be kept private, or telephones, the old telephones. We're dealing with the new types of telephones and its use in social media. And that really blurs the line between the public and the private. And it's very easy now to share information with the tools that we have. And it's to the point where people are asking the question, is there the end of privacy? And one quote has it, you have zero privacy anyway, get over it. And so we have what's now been called essentially the private social public divide, where we have stuff that we can expect to be private, other areas where we expect to be public, but then we have a whole middle ground where a lot of venues could be public or private. Our so-called social world, depending on context and the rules of the game, could be either public or private. And hence, it's very hard to know when we have an expectation of privacy. So the major issue is that the use of social media as a source of research data, how do we use that without eroding the public trust in research? Now, on one hand, one could say the ethical principles that apply to the review of social media research is similar to the traditional offline approach. Now, the question is, how can IRBs assess the ethical issues related to subject recruitment via social media and ensure the subject respect or expectation of privacy? So we have to make sure that the researchers are familiar with the policies of the social media platforms that they plan to use and consider people's notion of privacy when they are using these social media platforms. Now, while social media could be an appealing recruitment tool, since we could reach large groups of people rather quickly, however, though we could access subjects and enhance recruitment, it's critical that researchers are transparent about their intentions and do not create fabricated profiles unless the deception is really justified by the intended benefits of the research. I mean, surely deception research occurs in the social sciences, but it's going to obviously occur much often as researchers use more and more the online environment for the research projects. For sure, the notion of privacy will vary across the different platforms, with groups and users being able to choose various privacy settings for sharing information. Researchers need to be clear when requesting access to a group what their intentions are, and to be sensitive as to how they will announce their presence in the space as a researcher. So essentially, researchers and IRBs need to know, again, whether one needs permission from a group administrator, request introduction, and read the group policies. So it's very important to prevent participants in the group from feeling betrayed and to avoid damaging the general public's trust in the research endeavor. And let me, now, interesting, and well, let me skip this. One interesting thing about social media is that social media have been used by subjects in a study that can impact the integrity of the study. And let me just paraphrase the next few slides. Essentially, especially in open label studies, subjects have been known to create private chat groups in which they discuss among themselves what they think, which arm of the study they have been enrolled in, and compare symptoms and results of tests, and they could figure out whether they think the drug they are receiving is working or not, and they could either leave the study if they think that they're not receiving the drug that they think is working. So even in a clinical trial, subjects get to know each other and compare notes about the study. So we're going to begin to review more and more these social media research studies, and we really need to know what is the expectation of privacy, what's the social risk, what's the expected benefits, and what we could keep to maintain the identities of the individuals. Questions about that? Have you guys reviewed social media research studies?
No, I don't think we get those kind of applications.
All right. Well, it's bound to come down the pike, what about as a recruitment tool?
I remember we got a request once by a psychiatrist who wanted to use the DHA social media outlet to recruit patients. I'm not sure if you remember Dr. Hamda. He's from Al Jalila, I forgot his name. And it was done in a proper way, so it was accepted at the time.
Right. Yeah. So recruitment efforts tend to be more benign in terms of whether privacy is being violated or not. So let me switch gears and go over issues about accessing the electronic clinical data or the electronic health record. Now, there's this notion of learning healthcare institutions, where the whole institution serves as a environment to learn from clinical practice, or in other words, do research to enhance our practice of medicine. And there's a certain type of research called comparative effectiveness research. Essentially, in this type of research, the issue is that we use a lot of drugs that haven't been shown in clinical studies to be effective. We use it off-label, or we use it even though it hasn't been specifically studied in the past. So let me, I have this other case study, but let's discuss it together. And you have that in your document. So this study is comparing two medications for hypertension that are both widely used and accepted clinical treatments. And there's really no defined clinical characteristics that would favor one drug over another for individual patients. So one could access retrospectively the records and try to determine which drug might be better than another drug. However, we know retrospective research trying to compare two drugs has its problems in terms of research or scientific integrity. So one wants to do now a prospective study with patients identified when physicians prescribe either of the two antihypertensive medications. Now, the electronic clinical data is being used to prospectively to select patients eligible for either medication, and they are randomized to receive one of the medications with physicians and patients. I mean, they're always able to override the randomized choice, but what you have is a patient is needing a drug for hypertension, and two drugs are available. And the purpose of the research is to try to understand which drug might be better than the other, because it's never been really studied in the research study. So one wants to do a prospective randomized clinical trial and randomize patients to one or the other drug. Now, the investigators come to the IRB and they are requesting that informed consent should be waived. And the reasons they give is that it's minimal risk. It involves two standard of care drugs. And the only research procedure is the randomization. And they're concerned that if they have to ask for informed consent, there may be consent bias, which would impact on the scientific validity of the study. So should the IRB waive research informed consent? I mean, the participants will give informed consent to use the drug, but should the IRB allow for a waiver of informed consent? What do you think?
For me, no. I think the participants should still know that they're taking part in the study. There should still be, even if it's part of their standard treatment, it's a clinical trial. They need to understand the benefits and risks associated with either treatment, and that they have the right to withdraw.
Okay.
Their
Other
data
thoughts?
would be collected.
What's that?
Their data would be collected, so there would be data collection.
Sure, right. There'll be data collection, just like in any other research study.
Yeah, so they have to give informed consent that
Why?
they're willing to share their data. There might be confidential data collected.
Well, I mean, how is that different from collecting data retrospectively?
So there is less than minimal risk in this study. However, our IRB won't allow the waiver of consent for the prospective studies. Even though it's a standard of care, the investigator would be collecting data systematically. So we as a committee would not accept the waiver of consent for the prospective studies, even though there is a less than minimal risk.
Okay. Have you ever reviewed a study that involves observation of people, like in a busy emergency room? And informed consent is waived.
It depends on the study.
Sure, right, no, okay, right.
Because
Okay.
I remember we reviewed one similar study where there was an observation with and there was medications used, but still there was an informed consent.
Okay. Well, no, absolutely depends on the context. So, now what is it about this context that makes you want to require informed consent, or I mean, it's minimal risk. And what about this issue about consent bias? You're not going to get a very good study. I mean, think about it. A lot of people may refuse, and you may get results that may not be generalizable to the whole population. So it is difficult with a prospective study. Well, having said that, what happens if the investigator said they want to access the medical records retrospectively, and they want a waiver of informed consent? Now, we would, one of the criteria for a waiver is that it would be impracticable to do the study with informed consent. Now, retrospectively, we have either logistical issues. It may be difficult to contact individuals. Let's say you're doing a study and you want to collect information for the last 5 years. And it may be difficult to contact the individuals. And also, again, from a methodological point of view, again, if you rely on informed consent, you may have consent bias, which may affect the scientific validity of the study. Would you improve a waiver in that situation?
Yes, we can. We can waive the consent.
All right, so then what's the difference here between retrospective and prospective?
So I think when any patient, and colleagues, please correct me if I'm wrong, any patient is treated or opens a medical record, a medical file at a hospital, they sign consent for de-identified data to be used for research purposes. So I think under the UAE or Dubai law, a retrospective study, they would have essentially have given permission for their de-identified data from medical records.
There is a general consent for receiving medical care, and within that consent, they consent as well that their medical information could be shared for research purposes.
Okay, so let's say now when they go in the hospital, in that consent form, it's written, there's a general notification saying that this institution is a learning institution, and the patients are informed that learning activities involving randomization are occasionally permitted without express consent. So,
Learning activities is not a research.
well, it's research. The purpose is to learn about clinical care. I mean, you could surely substitute that word and say research activities involving randomization. So let's say now you're having that general consent form, and you say this is a learning institution that does research, and some of the activities may involve randomization to one or two standard of care interventions or drugs, and it's better to do that without express consent. And so there's a general notification. What do you think of that?
Here, maybe the patient understood that this is only for one disease or for one subject. And what if his case used for many other type of research?
I'm not sure if I understand.
Maybe the patient give a consent for only one type of research, his disease. And maybe the researcher will use it for another type of research, another disease, another condition, something like this.
Well,
You mean broad consent?
we're not talking about secondary research. We're not talking about sparse specimens that could be used for investigation of other types of entities. So I'm not looking to trying to persuade everybody on this presentation, but all I'm saying that this is an issue that's been brought up with using data from the electronic medical record, and essentially the issue is how do we balance autonomy and privacy versus the common good. And now in this type of study, it would be impracticable to do the trial without waiving the consent, or essentially doing the research and getting good data, especially the study has important social value and poses no more than minimal risk, and except for the issue is how much of an interest do people have in their autonomy and privacy, and these are other reasons why getting consent may affect the scientific validity of the study. And I didn't put it on the slide, and maybe I'll share these references with you. The issue is, how do we know what the public thinks about it? Where do our notions of the primacy of autonomy and privacy come from? Or the importance of privacy in research and the extent to which we protect it. I need to take a look at you guys when I ask that question. I'm trying to get a little philosophical here. Who put these ideas in our head about the importance of privacy in these situations? Where do they come from? How do we know that it's important to protect privacy prospectively, but it's okay retrospectively? Privacy is not that important.
Privacy laws, regulation.
And where are they coming from?
Government?
What's that?
Is it the government?
Oh, yeah, sure. And
Policymakers,
okay, and where do they get their notions?
From us, from the
Code
people,
of conduct.
From
cases.
us.
Yes.
Code of conduct.
This is becoming a very circular conversation. Where do we get our notions of the importance of privacy?
From cases that happens, from
experience, from cases.
experience, from cases, from benefits, from losses.
From
Lawsuits.
code of conduct within the country itself.
Well, essentially, it's more top down than bottom up. If you, I'll share these papers with you. If you ask the public, okay, and ask them, listen, we could do really important research if we relax the requirements of informed consent in cases in which the social harm is minimal and you'll be non-identifiable. And the public says, go ahead. Good luck. So what I'm trying to say is that this notion of the primacy of autonomy needs to be questioned more. Thomas Hobbes, a philosopher from the 18th century, maybe it was the 17th century, was concerned that actually we lose a lot of autonomy when we don't collaborate in groups. We hurt ourselves in living lives when we try to be very individualistic. And that's why I put down this this comment about autonomy, privacy versus the common good, and which is more important to people, our autonomy or the common good? And I think that's something that needs to be more investigated, especially in the age of big data, when we have all these data and it's becoming more and more realized that it's very difficult to keep these data identifiable. And this is since the expectation of privacy is becoming less and less, we have to ask that question, well, if we want to use big data to advance the common good, is that something that we could do? Because again, with all these combination of these publicly available data sets, privacy is becoming less and less achievable when we do these research studies. So it's just something to ask, or something we have to ask. So having said that, let's do a switch and talk about data, another large data set, data from mobile health. And I mainly want to talk about text messaging data and wearables. So in terms of text messaging, there's a lot of research studies being done with the use of text messaging via the mobile phone. And studies are being done to not only deliver information to individuals, but also skills-based intervention using text messaging, especially for, well, in the US, the African American groups, but all over the world, hard to reach rural groups who have mobile phones, okay, are being recruited into studies that involve the delivery of information and also skills-based interventions as well. And let me let's see, right. So, and well, again, we're using the mobile phones to deliver text messages, and the use of text messaging has skyrocketed in recent years, with 80% of all adults using cell phones for sending or receiving text messages. How many here use routinely text messaging to communicate with other people? Everybody, right. What do you think is my primary means of communicating with my two sons?
Text messaging?
Yes, right. It's not the phone. It's not even the emails. You know, the millennials do not use emails. It's all text messaging. Okay.
What's up?
Yes, what's up? Right, exactly. And so that's how I communicate with all my trainees and in my training programs. And so there's been studies that suggest that text message-based HIV interventions and to dispense information and resources for STIs, HIV, and pregnancy prevention in traditionally hard to reach populations may be especially impactful for minority and other higher risk adults. And let's. Oh, right. Okay. And also, as I mentioned before, text-based skills training also have used text messaging to deliver skills for example, about issues of how to deal with unfavorable sexual conversations and other types of skills. And the issue, however, with the mobile phone, right? I don't have to tell you is how do we safeguard participants' privacy, given the potentially sensitive nature of the content to be delivered, potential intrusiveness of communications, and the inability of researchers to guarantee confidentiality within text message communication, because text messaging provides a written record of a participant's participation in the intervention. How many times do you hear that someone is going to impound someone's text messages that have been used previously in whatever situation? So they did a study. They wanted to know from the public which type of intervention would they prefer, having dissemination of information with a group-based intervention or a text-based intervention. And especially now in the era of COVID, we're finding out that we have to resort more and more to text-based. So they did a focus group of individuals and asked them, how do you balance the risk and benefits? And when asked about group-based intervention, the focus group participants mentioned decreased convenience regarding transportation and childcare, lack of comfort with discussing sexual topics in a group, lack of comfort in the group, and especially feeling stigmatized. However, they thought there were benefits to a group-based intervention, being able to share experiences in the group, teaching others what was learned in the intervention, and learning from others in the intervention itself. Now, in regards to a text-based approach for the intervention, now some participants says there's a lack of comfort with texting about sexual topics in general, and within the intervention, intrusiveness, someone else seeing and responding to the text. It's very hard to sometimes keep your text messages confidential, but many hypothesize benefits in terms of convenience, enjoying the intervention, and sharing sexual experiences through text. So what I'm trying to say is that a group-based intervention versus text-based, there's obviously positives and negatives to devising a research intervention that's group-based or text-based. And as I said before, especially in this era of COVID, it's looking like more and more we have to do these research studies with the mobile phones. Recently, I wanted to do a study doing focus group with nurses about their moral distress caring for COVID patients. And I couldn't do the regular face-to-face focus groups. So I used Zoom. And it turned out to be very beneficial using Zoom, and people were able to express themselves. Actually, I was concerned that the IRB was going to reject the study because I was using Zoom to do focus groups, but they accepted it. Now, I was looking on what was it? Yes, on clinicaltrials.com, and this is an example of a study that's being done, a randomized controlled trial of the effect of text message reminders on antiretroviral therapy, looking at whether adherence could be improved by using text messaging reminders. The investigators hypothesized that use in the intervention will demonstrate a clinically meaningful increase in adherence at 3 and 6 months post baseline, and they'll enroll non-adherent young adults with HIV. And so they're using the text messages to try to improve compliance. The study will send daily text messages, reminders to the patients, randomized to the intervention group according to the medication schedule, and then there'll be a control group receiving the usual type of reminders, but only when they come to clinic. So what are the ethical issues with using daily text messages, reminders? What you as an IRB, you get this study and they want to use text messages.
Any
What's
safety
that?
issue? Any safety issue for the
Okay.
compliance?
Well, what are the safety issues?
That mobile is not active, or something happened to the mobile, or the person is not following what's being used.
What do you mean not following what's being used?
I mean, it's not. I mean, if you don't keep a track of the messages, and I don't know.
Well,
I mean, nowadays, not many people use SMS.
Yes.
Oh wow! What did I show you on a previous slide? What did use of text has skyrocketed 80%, and specifically among hard to reach populations, and more frequently among African Americans and young adolescents. So, I mean,
You mean like WhatsApp, not normal text message? I mean,
yes, right.
You're talking WhatsApp, talking the latest thing. I mean, different countries, they have different.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's what you mean, not
You don't
normal.
have to be in a group,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to
So
be
talking
in a
about
group
WhatsApp,
chat. So the issue is, I mean, they're doing the study and looking at daily text messages. How do we remind people now to take their medications? Only when they come to clinic, right?
Yes.
How good is that?
But they get reminded about their appointment, their arrival time, their investigation. We have some messages that goes to patient in this way.
Right.
Yes, we do use the text messages.
Right. So this is a study that is looking at daily text messages daily to remind
because
people.
of the disturbance actually and invasion of privacy, because this is every day for 6 months. It's too much.
Well, I mean, but they sign up for it, right?
I agree on that.
I mean, well, this is a study looking at to see what effect is daily text messages, but the privacy concern with using the mobile phones is that how secure are the mobile phones? Who has access? Are the messages being encrypted? Do they share their phones with other people?
Does it
I mean,
stolen, get lost?
what's that?
If it is stolen or get lost.
Well, yes, right. It'll get lost. Okay, we're talking about people with HIV, and that's the privacy concern. It's not so much the text message itself; it's the privacy issue with using the mobile phones. They're using also mobile phones to help women with domestic violence. There was a study one time in which the women were given mobile phones and they could text when they're getting into problems with their husbands or their partners. They could also text to receive help in dealing with partners who are being very intrusive. And doing the study, they received a lot of text messages from the women regarding the incidents of sexual problems. In fact, the women with the mobile phones reported a larger incidence of sexual advances from their partners than the women in the control group. And they stopped the study thinking that the partners were recognizing the messages on the mobile phones. However, after talking with the women, they realized that they were using their mobile phones it wasn't because they were reporting an increased incidence of sexual advances. The issue was that having the mobile phone empowered people to report. And so the mobile phone proved to be a method of empowerment as well as serving as a means of an intervention for the women. So let me. This study was the what I mentioned before about mining physicians' opinions about the COVID crisis, and I only mentioned that this was they access medical professionals on the Twitter social media platform, and they used a mixed methods approach, blending a quantitative and qualitative analysis on these tweets, and they used machine learning techniques to analyze the text. I only mention this is because they got all these data from the tweets. I don't know if I mentioned it here, but they analyzed like 40,000 tweets, and they had to use a machine learning techniques or AI techniques in order to analyze this data. So it's a whole lot of data being analyzed in order to do this study. So let me end by saying some words about wearable technology and discuss what types of data are being collected with wearable technology, assess the research data risk with wearable technology, and discuss strategies for lowering the risk and research with wearable technology. So what's the definition of wearable technology? They're devices with embedded sensors. We have smartwatch, smart shirt, okay, Bluetooth key tracker, smart shoes, smart socks, pants. I mean, everything you wear could be embedded with a sensor and could be wirelessly connected to other devices via an app and sends information to a built-in processing unit that could be located in an external server. And this is example of wearable technology types: jewelry, glasses, cameras, clothing, fitness trackers, you name it. It could be anything you wear, and these are somewhat obscure wearable technology: smart diapers, underwear, tattoos, and this slide shows the type of data that could be obtained from this from the wearable. How healthy you are, what your environment is like, whether you sleep alone, how stressed you are, how athletic you are, whether you're social, what you do for fun. I mean, essentially, all these wearables could obtain all these different types of information from you. So think about that in regards to privacy.
Zero privacy.
What's that?
Zero privacy.
Zero privacy. And as the other slide said, get over it. Okay. All right.
Live with it.
I mean, there is no sense of privacy. If you go to clinicaltrials.gov, these are the type of studies being done. The use of Fitbit for sleep apnea, using Garmin watches to detect atrial fibrillation, study evaluating improved arm movement in people who have had a stroke, assessing the effectiveness of a wearable automated bionic pancreas system that delivers both insulin and glucagon to young children with diabetes. So no shortages of research study. And the benefits of wearables, obviously, it's less intrusive for participants because the data could be collected in the comfort of the homes. They don't have to make follow-up visits. One could get a baseline for individuals, potentially a larger sample size, more accurate results since you're getting data 24 hours a day. Researchers could spend less time on data entry, could respond to adverse events more quickly, and data collection may be less expensive. So a lot of advantages to doing research using wearables. Let me skip this. Now, the issue, one of the issues is that wearables are not medical devices. You know, something like the Apple Watch, right, or the Fitbit hasn't been approved by the FDA. Okay, hasn't been evaluated by the FDA, and in terms of accuracy, sensitivity, and it would be hard to adhere to FDA regulations. Could be problematic to be recognized by the FDA as a clinical device. And also data obtained by medical devices are protected by patient privacy laws like HIPAA in the US. However, those privacy laws don't apply to consumer grade wearable devices. So think about this. You're collecting all this health information, just like in the clinic, but it's not protected by privacy laws. Okay. Now, interesting enough, in the European Union, their privacy laws do extend to data generated by wearables. So the health information obtained from wearables in the European Union are protected by privacy laws, but not so in the US. And I don't know the situation in the UAE in regards to the privacy of all this sensitive health information that's being collected by wearables. Wearable data is highly identifiable. And again, even if you collect it, de-identify it, again, if you merge it with all the public databases, it could be re-identified. So you as an IRB need to think about privacy of the data, the security of the data. Essentially, we all know about Wi-Fi threats, Bluetooth threats, cellular threats, and from poor encryption, I mean, how many times you go to public wireless outlets and those wireless outlets are not secure. So there's many different sources of cyber threats or cyber hacking for that matter. So these data are not secure. And then also we have an issue with bystanders. When you collect this information from devices like mobile phones or video phones, or let's say just with mobile phones, if you collect audio from the mobile phones, you may be capturing audio from bystanders who are near the smartphones when you collect the data. And so there's a huge risk to bystanders with the use of mobile technology, well, especially with the use of mobile technology in these studies. So there's privacy risk to third parties. And this slide just shows that the this graph, it shows the exploitability of the device itself, okay, and with the potential of patient harm if the data gets exposed. And as the exploitability of the device increases, meaning the insecurity of the device increases, combined with the sensitivity of the data and the harm to the participant, you're in this region of risk. And let me just, right. So the ethical issues, let me end by just briefly talking about the ethical issues. We, discussed before about informed consent, data sharing process, data mining, lack of policies in protecting the data in consumer grade devices, or meaning the wearables, which are not medical devices. So IRBs need to consider how well a device may answer the research question. What are the methods to protect, encrypt the device? Is there a plan in case the device is lost or stolen? How do you encrypt sensitive data? How do you keep the apps updated? And how do you understand the cyber risk of all these devices? Researchers also need to determine what types of wearable devices are acceptable to use and understand how different device types could impact data collection. They need to ensure that patients understand how to use these devices, and researchers may need to update disclosures and consent forms so patients fully understand what data are being collected, how it will be used, and how any personal identifiable information or private health data will be protected. So let me end by, I sent you a paper this morning or last night, whenever you received it. There's been 2 papers written about considerations for ethics review of big data in health research, and the recommendations they wrote down was one has to prevent the danger of downstream data leakage and prevent inadvertent individual identification, expand the purview and involvement of IRBs. I mean, IRBs need to be involved, but there needs to be a clearer understanding of the risk and benefits of health-related big data research, harmonize the ethical standards for big data research, and rethinking the composition of IRBs in terms of the expertise that you have with the big data research. And in fact, in a similar paper, I think this is the paper I sent last night, written in this year, 2020, and their recommendations were somewhat similar. Essentially, strengthen the oversight function of the IRBs, improve the review process in terms of improving the review process, meaning a focus on data security, data privacy, and looking at the risks and benefits of these types of protocol. Build capacity of the IRB members in this field of study, expand your competency, and also engage more with the researchers to make sure that the researchers understand the privacy risks with all these different means of collecting data. So I think right now it appears that what's coming down the track is a lot of social media research that's being done, data mining, the Facebook, the tweets. There's a lot of data out there, and it's probably more convenient to collect data that way rather than the usual way of doing surveys and doing focus groups. Why go through the trouble of having focus groups when all you have to do is mine the data on Facebook or look at the tweets? But that involves a lot of data and much more privacy risks. And so, you know, the last few weeks we talked about privacy risks and confidentiality with biospecimens, which is one major source of data for big data. And now we're talking about the social media platforms, the electronic medical record, and now the wearables, which is enhancing how we interact with patients and get their data, and improving their healthcare. But all that has to obviously come with research.
Ralph, can we
Yes.
Talk more about expanding the competencies? I mean, for our benefit.
What's that?
I want more information about how we expand the competencies of the IRB in this subject for the recommendation.
Well,
Building capacity and expanding the competencies.
Well, one, we need to talk about the type of content.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I think that's the question you're asking.
Yes.
Okay, and I think that we need to, if I simply summarize what I've been talking about, I think a short list was to understand better the risks to privacy with these electronic devices? What are the sources of privacy risks with the mobile phones, with the wearable? What are the specific ways in which data could be exposed? Over insecure Wi-Fi networks, data that's not encrypted. It could be a simple thing of losing your phone, sharing your phone. If you come across a study that uses a mobile phone, are the participants being told about keeping the phone secure away from, the eyes of other people with text messages? Okay. What happens if you lose your phone? Will your text messages be exposed? How secure are your passwords? Who knows your passwords?
No one.
No one. Okay. Well, could it be hacked?
Yes, it can be, but we have safety measures.
What do you mean you have safety measures? I mean, hospital systems are being hacked.
Yeah, but they give you some type of measures, double PIN number. You have to do other measures.
I know, duo authentication. How many people actually use that?
We have been hacked so many times. So
okay, well, there's your answer. So I think there needs to be, in terms of competency, more awareness of the potential privacy risks. Okay, I think with the mobile devices and the wearables, we're maybe not up to snuff with all the potential risks, and people need to understand those risks. The participants need to understand what those risks are when they enter the study, and when they start using these wearables and using text messaging. Also similar to when they join online communities and social media. They need to understand what is their expectation of privacy, and is their expectation of privacy not realistic when they join these online forums. And so we, as an IRB, need to understand these risks and need to understand how to minimize the risks. In terms of, do the participants understand the risks, and do they know what the risks are especially with studies dealing with sensitive information? And then the other thing is engaging with the researchers to make sure that they understand what these risks are. And also the issue of, as I don't want to be glib about it, but as we mentioned before, the end of privacy. We are making essentially a bargain in having all the benefits of all this new technology with a risk to our privacy. And just like we make a determination, before COVID, we wanted to fly all around the world, and we accept the risks of, injury, and we accept those risks. And I think more and more, in order to reap the benefits of all this new technology, we may start to think that the lessen our concern with the privacy. Anyway, I think it's a fascinating subject, and as a researcher, I think I'm going to learn more and more how to do research with tweets. Okay, it's too much effort to do interview studies. Okay, I'd rather start analyzing the tweets. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Okay, all right, good. So we'll see you next week. Okay, all right, good.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank
All right.
you.
Have a good night.
Right.
Good night.
Right, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.